Gaming Dogs. Gaming Dogs.
Take you went to Gaming Dogs.
When talking about Nintendo creators, most people think of Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. Miyamoto's mentor, Gunpei Yokoi, may not be as well known as Mr. Miyamoto, but is just as important. Yokoi designed the very first toy released by Nintendo, the Ultra Hand, in 1966 when they changed from being only a play card manufacturer to a toy manufacturer. When Nintendo decided to transition into the video game industry, Yokoi came up with the successful Game & Watch, based off of the LCD screens from calculators. Yokoi was then part of most of the early arcade games by Nintendo, including the hit arcade game Donkey Kong. Yokoi did have his failures, like being responsible for the Virtual Boy. But he was also responsible for creating one of Nintendo's most popular products, the Game Boy. Before the Game Boy, Nintendo released their first home console, the Famicom in Japan in 1983, and the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America in 1985. And Yokoi was part of the R&D1 development team. After the huge successes of Shigeru Miyamoto and his team R&D4's Super Mario and The Legend of Zelda, Miyamoto and R&D4 were tasked with making sequels to their popular titles. At this time, it became R&D1's job to create new franchises. R&D1's division leader, Yokoi, wanted to prove his development team's worth again and set out to create a more grown-up game compared to the more kid-friendly games his protege had made. Yokoi had been the producer of Miyamoto's popular titles, so he took inspiration from them and also added a darker inspiration from Ridley Scott's 1979 horror film Alien. What came out was a non-linear shooter platformer and was one of the first Nintendo games to go for a more adult audience. The game was named by putting the words Metro and Android together, Metroid. The main character of the game, Samus, was given the last name Aaron after the famous soccer player Pele's middle name. The game was also co-developed with Intelligent Systems. Metroid was directed by Satoru Okada and Yoshito Sakamoto, and featured music written by Hirokazu Tanaka. Nintendo released Metroid for the Famicom Disk System on August 6, 1986, then on the Nintendo Entertainment System in North America in August 1987. Metroid sparked the beginning of one of the most beloved franchises of Nintendo. Even though sales were not great, Metroid is usually ranked close to the top of every list of the best NES games. Metroid was also ahead of its time with one of the biggest twist endings in gaming history. After the player defeats the final boss, Mother Brain, the main character takes off their suit to reveal that she is actually a woman. Making the main protagonist a female in such a game in 1986 was a very progressive move by the developers. To keep the game's secret ending a surprise, Samus was always referred to as he in all the game's promotional material and in the game's manual. Because of Metroid's low sales, the game was not a priority for Nintendo. R&D1 then started working on creating the handheld gaming system, the Game Boy. The Game Boy was released in 1989 and was very successful, so R&D1 brought back Samus for the new handheld. Metroid 2: Return of Samus was released in 1991. However, most critics claimed that it was a watered-down version of the original, but Metroid 2 did bring at least two important things to the franchise. The first was Samus's armor. The armor design from the Game Boy game became the design they would use in every Metroid game after. Also, after defeating the final boss, the Metroid Queen, Samus comes across an egg and a Metroid is hatched, but Samus lets it live and takes it home with her. Metroid 2's ending is important to the game that Yokoi and the original Metroid director, Yoshio Sakamoto, had been secretly working on while R&D1 was working on Metroid 2. Sakamoto and his team had started working on a new Metroid game for Nintendo's newest home console, the Super Nintendo. The team had actually started development without formal approval, knowing Nintendo would not be as excited for the game as they were. Nintendo probably would have been if they knew that the team was actually making a masterpiece. Super Metroid was released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo. The game took everything good from the original and made it great. The game's giant enemies looked amazing and the power-ups were awesome. It also had that dark, mature feel from the original. Super Metroid tells one of the best stories told on the Super Nintendo. The story kicks off right after the ending of Metroid 2. The baby Metroid is stolen by the evil space pirates and taken to produce a new Metroid army. Samus sets out to defeat the new Metroids, but with another amazing twist, Samus loses in the final boss fight. At the last second, the baby Metroid that Samus had saved returns and is all grown up, and in an act of gratitude sacrifices itself to save Samus. Sadly, Super Metroid was the last Metroid game creator Gunpei Yokoi would work on. He tragically died in an automobile accident in 1997. He will always be remembered as an important video game figure for many of the contributions he gave us. Everything in Super Metroid, from the non-linear design, the platforming, the action, and the music, were about as perfect as one could get in video game design. But again, sales were not great. Super Metroid was released at the end of the Super Nintendo's life cycle. In Japan, it was already competing with the PlayStation. Like the original Metroid, it was more popular in the West, but still most gamers were waiting for the newest home console, the Nintendo 64. These factors all contributed to the low sales of Super Metroid, but that doesn't mean it wasn't an amazing game. Critics praised Super Metroid, and today it is not only thought of as one of the best Super Nintendo games, as well as one of the best video games of all time.
Funky. Go funky. Gaming dogs. Gaming dogs.
They go into Gaming Docs.